And here we go live. Hi, I'm Dan Kingerski on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now platforms, the YouTube, the Facebook, and just for this occurrence, I've added the X live as well. So the Penguins complete the 2025 NHL trade deadline, and I would bet dollars to donuts or maybe a couple chips on the craps table. This was not what you expected. I think you expected some big moves. I think I did as well. I think you expected some big returns. You start to see the market. You see the huge market for Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand. You see Brock Nelson go for a small king's ransom. And then you see early in the morning, you see big names going for just ridiculous sums of money or sums of trade hauls. And you expect, I think I did as well, Rickard Rakell to be part of that, thinking, wow, what can a 30-goal scorer who only makes $5 million acquire? Let me get rid of this, and you and I will talk here. I am in Las Vegas still. I am staying one day with my friend, known to many media people, but very few public, Sean, who's been a scorer for the San Jose Sharks, the Vegas Golden Knights, the Pittsburgh Penguins, as well as on NBC radio and such. And I do realize I badly need a haircut, so maybe someday I'll get home. Yeah, in fact, you see Sean chiming in there, loves the background. This is Sean's porch. I should show you the palm trees that I'm looking at here. So let's get into, let's do a quick recap, because I know it was coming fast and furious, at least for the Penguins, kind of all in a 2-hour window. So in is Tommy Novak. They got him from the Nashville Predators. Technically Luke Schenn, but we'll talk about Schenn in just a second. Let's see here. So in was Novak, and then a pile of draft picks, right? They got the 2026 second rounder and a 2027 fourth rounder for Luke Schenn, whom they had just acquired from Nashville. They got a 25 second round pick from the Washington Capitals. That was in the Anthony Beauvillier trade. And they got a 2027 third rounder for Cody Glass. And there was some minor league swaps going on there. They also acquired from the Toronto Maple Leafs, just under the wire, defenseman Connor Timmins, a right-handed guy, kind of soft, but he's got some talent. He kind of is the right-handed version of P.O. Joseph, really. He battled some severe concussions early in his career with the Colorado Avalanche. And they've got fourth-line plug, kind of spark plug, guy who flies around and hits everything that moves, Connor Dewar. What went out, obviously, was, let me see, where's my out? Oh, there's my out. Wednesday night was Michael Bunting. Luke Schenn technically counts as an out. Anthony Beauvillier and Cody Glass. So grade-wise, what do we call it here? I'm going to go with a giant big C, because all this was more table setting. Dubas didn't take that big step, didn't make that big move. I can see why a lot of you are disappointed, given the extraordinary trade prices today. In fact, I see Chicken Ala King here in the comments on YouTube saying, Brian Dumoulin fetched a second, and we couldn't land anything for Gerzelchik, not even with retention. It's a good point, because you look at some of the Penguins' presumed trade chips. Erik Karlsson, Rickard Rakell, but the smaller ones as well, Noel Acciari, Matt Grzelcyk. They all stayed. And that kind of, I seeing some of the comments, and that kind of, I think, is a little bit confusing. Clearly, the Penguins need players for Friday night. They only have 12 healthy forwards to face Vegas and only 6 healthy defensemen. If they traded anybody else, they would have been playing shorthanded. But I don't think one game in Vegas would necessarily or should necessarily impact the next 10 years if you could have made that big trade. I'm struggling to find a lot of the pluses out of this. Cody Glass for a third-round pick? I mean, that's ancillary, right? You were getting a decent fourth-line center and a very versatile guy up and down the lineup in Cody Glass. No, you were not going. Dubas would have been insane to qualify him as an RFA this summer at $2.5 million. You're going up from that. No dice, right? That would have been insane. But Glass had value at a much lower salary. Glass also had a pretty good locker room presence because he was sort of a hub for younger players. What I mean by that is Philip Tomasino and Owen Pickering living with Cody Glass. And I think it was fairly important for those guys to have someone like Glass on the inside, taking care of them, looking out for them. I see Scott here on Twitter says, Glass was useless. Look at the advanced analytics. And the analytics will tell you an exact opposite story on that, Scott. I know somebody said to me today, 4 goals. I mean, don't oversell him. And I don't think we need to do that. But I do think when you look at the analytics, on every line, the line got better. Whether it was up to 53% for the fourth line, up to 58, 59% scoring chance rate, Corsi rate for the second line. I thought that had some value, or at least more value than a third-round pick in 2 years. So if you're scrounging for draft picks, that's not a bad idea. Here are the statistics. Let me pull up. Let me share screen here with you, because I'm going to pull up the. Let's go to the. Where are the Penguins draft picks? This is the Penguins lineup via Puckpedia. Not so much different than it was a couple of days ago, with Novak kind of basically filling the exact same role that Cody Glass was in just a little while ago. Let me see if I can page back and find the draft picks. Yeah, you get the idea. We'll have to talk to Puckpedia about making this a little easier to navigate around. Good God almighty. There it is. Look at all of these draft picks. 18 in the top 3 rounds of the next 3 years. It's not possible to sign all of those draft picks. You would need a second American Hockey League team. I mean, you really would. Think about that. They'd have the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins and, I don't know, the Rochester Penguins, Part 2. You would need a second team for the overflow. So I guess we'd all assume a lot of these are going to be traded, right? That's part of the table setting. I can't say Dubas punted today, but he added more silverware, more plates, more cups. And I think we still have no idea what's going to happen with all of this. I know all of you are like, trade this person, trade that person. And there are more trades coming this summer. You would have to think, one of Ricard Raquel, Brian Rust would be traded eventually. You'd have to think that they're going to sign Matt Grzelcyk now. So what do you do on the left side of the defense? You have Owen Pickering on the way that you have to sort of make some space for Pickering for next season. Let me get to some of the questions here. We're doing this live. Let's see here. One-timer. With the number of picks that the Penguins have, can we expect Dubas to bring a big name in town this summer? Let me check the here is the cap situation for the Penguins. Without any additions or any extrapolations, they will spend $67.3 million next year on 15 players. Let's assume a couple of minimum wage prospects will crack the lineup. That means 17 players, $69 million. Okay, so they, 5 or 6 more players. Then you factor in Philip Tomasino is an RFA, so they're going to sign him. Let's say $2 million for Tomasino. That's 18 players and $21 million to spend. That's a ton of money. But would you sign a big name, big money free agent, even if they were willing to come to Pittsburgh? Let's table that discussion for just a moment. Let's just consider. Let's assume that. Oh, I don't know. Let's go something extreme. Sam Bennett. Bennett will not come to the Penguins, but let's just say Bennett was interested in Pittsburgh and he cost $10 million this summer. So you're signing a 28-year-old before you've begun that retool process, before you've begun to spend these draft picks, before you've turned the corner. I genuinely thought today was that corner turn, or going to be that corner turn, but it really wasn't. So now the Penguins have a cache of future assets. Can they affix several to players like Ryan Graves, Tristan Jarry to move them along? I don't think so. I think enough teams are going to have enough money that a salary dump isn't going to be a big thing this summer. I think the Penguins had a hot chance today and maybe sort of, I don't know, do I say blew it? But I think they passed on a big opportunity. Yeah, Mike wants me to grow the mullet. No, listen, Mike, I'm already like female repellent as it is. The mullet. Let's see here. Matt is glad they kept Raquel. The price must have been high. Sure, it absolutely was. I'd be hard pressed to think at least one or two teams didn't come close to it, though. Let's see here. Some Dubas hate. Dubas would never trade his favorite superstar, Noel Acciari. The Penguins do have a couple of players, young players, and now with Connor Dewar, who could take that Acciari spot. So it is a little bit interesting that Acciari is still a Penguin. Josh says, I wish they could have addressed the goaltending. Well, Josh, they are addressing the goaltending. You've got Joel Blomqvist. There's still work. Don't give up on Blomqvist. Nedeljkovic is showing himself to be an average number one goalie. Don't undersell that, right? Don't poo-poo Nedeljkovic. A number one goalie who's, a 905, 907 save percentage is not a terrible thing. Now, I know Nedeljkovic's season-long save percentage is much lower than that, but look at his body of work since they put Tristan Jarry through waivers. It's pretty good. Yeah, Scott didn't like Cody Glass. Penn 67 did like Cody Glass. Chicken Alley King says Raquel can still be dealt over the summer. He certainly can, but will the price be as good over the summer as it was today? That's a gamble. If you are assuming the price is going to stay at these drunken sailor prices, my goodness, I have never seen a trade deadline like this where nearly every single trade brought a reaction of, holy crap. Let's see here. Adam heard that, Adam, I'm going to assume you don't have inside sources. So when you say you heard the trade fell through, what you're actually referring to was a fake report that went around Twitter really quickly. Unless you do have some inside sources. Maybe you're talking to Eric Tulsky. I'll give you his email and phone number. He's actually way too accessible. But no, I didn't bother him for the last few months. Nass says the team is in rebuild mode. It's taking 3 to 4 years at least. Expecting a faster rebuild is fantasy. Oh, I don't think so. I think with the table setting that Dubas had already done to this point, you sort of look to that 2 to 3 year window where you've turned the corner and you're on the upswing. Right now, the Penguins are still on the launch pad. They've got a whole lot more rocket fuel, but they're still on the launch pad, and they still lack the high-end future assets. They've got their own first-round picks, which should be pretty high, right? And I suspect the Rangers' first-round pick that will come to them in 2025. I think they'll have the Rangers' first round pick this year, and it'll be like 17th or 18th, which it'll be okay. You're not going to get a number one center with that 17th or 18th pick. Maybe you get it with that 5th or 6th pick, though. And maybe next year the Penguins clearly won't be very good either. And you get, another top 5 pick. I suppose that's where you're looking for your top center. But other than that, it's been quantity over quality. Brian Lang says, I think Connor Dewar can bring the same thing Cody Glass brought. Actually, very different games. Cody Glass was not physical, didn't play with a physical edge. Glass was all about the puck movement, keeping the play alive, moving it forward. Dewar Dewar, I think it is Dewar, is far more of a crash and bang, little 5'10" spark plug, Blake Lizotte, Nola Chari sort of guy. Nass says Dubas had a good day today. Chicken Alley King sees those 12 picks in June and hoping for some gems. I mean, just they should get a few NHL players out of that, shouldn't they? Maddie says, how did Grzelcyk not get traded? Dubas didn't want any more third rounders. I suppose. I thought Grzelcyk would have been a second rounder all day. I believe that. So I would expect to see Matt Grzelcyk re-signed. Otherwise, it would be insanity to have not traded him. Let's go to Richard here. Many teams traded so many picks this year, they will be scrounging for picks for next year's draft. So essentially, Kyle Dubas becomes Red from Shawshank. He took everybody's picks. He's going to trade them back to them, I guess, for a profit, you're thinking? All of these things are a yes, right? The Penguins are not in worse shape today than they were a month ago or even yesterday. They're not in worse shape. It's hard to say that they are in much better shape, though. They've just got more lottery tickets. And you know how lottery tickets work. You might hit on a couple. Let's see here. Danny says Rust is gone July 1st. I don't think so. And I'm going to tell you why, Danny. Think of what a big deal Mike Sullivan and Kyle Dubas made of this guy, Luke Schenn. Think of what a huge deal. We need him to shepherd the players into the next phase. We need that leadership. We need all of this. They were willing to keep Luke Schenn, at least by their, face value words, right? Brian Rust is that exact same player, except I think Rust is a lot better and younger, by the way. More, certainly affordable. So I don't think Brian Rust gets traded at all, quite frankly. I don't see Brian Rust getting traded. Then again, I would have told you that Rickard Rakell would get traded. And there would have been a bigger push to trade Erik Karlsson today, too. Danny comes back for a second bite at the apple. Why wouldn't the price rise? The cap is going up. I'm not following you there, Danny. The value of what would go down? I'm not sure what you're talking about. Oh, why would the trade values go down? Because there won't be the scarcity of resources over the summer. Today, there was a great lack of sellers. Thus, the price went way up. Over the summer, there's going to be more sellers or more hockey trades available. Therefore, there won't be the scarcity, and the price will come down. This is economics, Danny. Come on, keep up with me here. Then again, with that lack of economics education, you could be a politician. I kid. Buying out Jari certainly is a possibility this summer, not Ryan Graves. If they bought out Ryan Graves this summer, they would be paying him for 8 more years. Alexander Foligno. There's no G, so I guess you're not related, darn it. Do I think they should have traded Bunting? I feel like that was a trade just to make a trade. Okay, let's get into the Tommy Novak situation. I'll tell you what. Barry Trotz's words hit heavy, at least in my viewing of the situation. If you didn't see it, let me pull up Barry Trotz's comments. Let me share the screen, and I will jump into the Pittsburgh Hockey Now story. To my knowledge, I think we were the only Pittsburgh outlet to actually have the story. Come on. There we go. The internet's being a little slow since I'm live broadcasting. But what essentially Trotz said here, let's page down. I've got it. Here's the money quote. This is Trotz just completely dumping on Novak. When he was a fourth line league minimum guy and scoring while getting some sheltered minutes, that word sheltered is very important, that fit him just fine. When you move up the lineup, it's harder to find your space and be productive. If you want to move up the lineup and get paid more, there's responsibility. There's a reason that guys get the higher salaries, because most nights they're getting harder matchups. They're expected to produce. So basically, Trotz slammed Novak, first of all, for wanting more money, because Novak is getting a few and $3.5 million. So Trotz clearly wasn't happy with having to pay Novak that kind of money. He clearly wasn't happy that Novak only produced 22 points in 55 games this season. What did he have? 13 goals, 9 assists. For a playmaking center, or at least that was supposed to be his deal, kind of a high hockey IQ guy, playing with some pretty good top six sort of wingers, Trotz is frustrated with Novak and let him have it, essentially saying, look, the guy can score points against the plugs. When you put him against good players, he didn't perform and he didn't earn his money. I think, look, at 27 years old, I don't know how much more of a ceiling there is. I don't know how much more of a ceiling there is for Novak at 27. Clearly, they'll work with him on some facets of his game, like they're doing with Philip Tomasino, another former Nashville Predator, and like they did or tried to do with Cody Glass, another former Nashville Predator. But you notice the guys that Trotz traded to the Penguins were all, I hate to insult the guys, but I'm going to say they were overpriced. They were making more than they produced. They were perimeter players in Nashville, and they weren't adding a lot of the layers to the game that Trotz. You saw Barry Trotz coach against the Penguins for more than a decade, Washington and New York, and he beat the Penguins pillar to post after the Penguins Stanley Cup runs. So, yeah, I tend to put some stock in what Trotz said. So when you're asking about Michael Bunting, I guess I've explained it all. I've shown my work without getting to the final conclusion, haven't I? Yeah, I share some dubious feelings about the deal. The Penguins, if you're just trading Michael Bunting for Tommy Novak, you're not getting full value. In fact, you're taking a good step backward. And the Penguins knew that too, because that's why they insisted on Luke Schenn. By the way, realize what the Penguins did with Luke Schenn. They essentially acquired him for a 4th-round pick, and then they flipped him for a 2 and a 4. Pretty good asset management. Also, like Cody Glass, the Penguins got a 3rd-rounder to accept Cody Glass, a 3rd and a 5th, or a 3rd and a 6th, and they traded him for a 3rd-rounder. So he brought the organization back 2 3rd-rounders. That's pretty good asset management. It doesn't necessarily make the roster today or even tomorrow any better. Maybe a week from now, and by a week, I mean in 3 or 4 years. Although a 3rd-rounder in 2027, you're not banking on that player. You're not going to see that player until 2030. At that point, we're watching the meteor. Let's go to Gable Fisk. Hey, Dan. Yes, I did make it over to El Cortez last night. That's where I had the chicken parm in the shadow of Bugsy. By the way, Bugsy's blazer in El Cortez. I didn't notice they revamped it, by the way. Walked in, went straight back to my little spot, Seagulls. Bugsy's blazer looks just like Mike Sullivan's big game blazer. I do love El Cortez. Look, I had a giant chicken parm dinner that was amazing, a glass of wine, and my bill was $32. You can't. Seriously, that was ridiculous. 35? It doesn't really matter. That's nothing in Vegas. Where yesterday for lunch for a roast beef sandwich with horseradish, tater tots, and a fountain drink and a little, kind of run through, I spent $26. So $35 on a great dinner was awesome. Yeah. El Cortez is just off of Fremont, for those of you wondering where I was. And El Cortez is special because Bugsy Siegel actually owned it. It was the last place he owned, before they took care of him. He's not a problem no more. One timer says, so far, number 14 and number 52 are the ones that have been called up from Wilkes-Barre. That's Imama and Emil Bemstrom. Do I think it'll change now that the trade deadline is over? No, actually, because Dewar is on his way, or Dewar rather. So that makes 13 forwards. They could Timmins will make 7 defensemen. So they have 20. They might call up one more. They might call up a veteran, I suppose. But I think at this point, they're going to ride. Ozymandias. The way Dubas talked in his I haven't seen the press conference yet. In fact, I was talking during the press conference. He said the way he talked, he knew it would take multiple years for contention. I think that's obvious. He would have to just fire all of his guns at once and explode into space at this point, to get them back in contention. The rest of your comment, Ozzy, the way Dubas talked, he knew it is pure revisionist history. Try again, Ozzy. Try to clarify that for me. I was surprised Jonathan Gruden was still on the farm team. Jonathan Gruden was what he was, a speedy, zippy, a little bit of physicality, fourth line center. He was that in the AHL and that in the NHL. He's a guy that if you needed 2 or 3 games from and you just needed to plug in a lineup hole for, a few games, Jonathan Gruden could do it. I suspect New Jersey got him for the same sort of depth. Giovanni says, why didn't they trade 58? I think you know the answer. I'm not even going to bother. That would take me 20 minutes. Dubas will need to keep players like Rustin Raquel. The cap floor will be over $70 million. Can't dump everyone. Something to be said for that, too, isn't there? You get into a point like, what was it? Was it Arizona? There was also another team that had to, Detroit, maybe, some years ago, had to throw big money free agent deals at players who were unworthy. No, it was Florida. Yeah, I guess that was almost like close to 15 years ago. Dave Boland got like a $5 million contract and he played 6 months, but they needed to reach the cap floor. So they just wildly overpaid a couple of blood and guts guys. And basically it's like, here's your check. Thanks for coming. Enjoy the beach. Trotz is making Hextall look like a competent GM. Again, this is very difficult to grade Kyle Dubas because his intentions might not be what you're thinking they are. He's still table setting. He's still getting set for the next phase or to launch into the next phase. Didn't happen today. Hextall was trying for the now. Dubas is no longer trying for the now. However, when Dubas was trying for the now, you're right. it surely didn't go well. Some of your comments I just don't get. Okay, let's go here. Robert Shoemaker, any RFAs the Penguins can give an offer sheet to this offseason? They now have the picks and the cap space. Well, glad you asked. This is where the J.J. Peterka watch will come in. No, Buffalo wasn't going to trade him today unless they got overpaid, unless they were able to flip him for full value. They were not going to lose a smidge on him, and they'd have no reason to. What's he have? 22 goals, 51 points in 61 games this season. That's just off the top of my head. If I'm off by a little digit here or there, bear with me. But now he is a restricted free agent. Could the Penguins slip a big old offer? Absolutely. There's probably half a dozen RFAs that we'll start getting into. It's a great point, Robert. I haven't done the research yet. Or haven't done the background research to see who's expected to resign and who's going to be a problem. Okay, yep, going to see the Wilkes-Barre Penguins tomorrow night. You know what? They're a fun team to watch. When they get into it, I've seen a couple clunkers, but I've also seen some games where they were really just letting it hang out. And they're a fun team. Whether they're down 3 goals in the third period or up 3 goals, they're getting after it. Back to Gable. Unfortunately, Vegas separates the fans and the media people. I was getting busted on quite a bit. Or not quite a bit. I was getting busted on. Where were we last game? What city was I in? I don't even remember. God help me. Oh, Denver, Colorado. That's where I was a few days ago. And yeah, like the media table is right above the fans, and a couple people came to say hi. I wish you could tonight. Yell or wave or throw a beer at me. Just make sure you don't open the beer first. Thoughts on signing Brock Besser as a free agent? Again, these 28-year-old guys don't fit where the Penguins are going to be. If they were going to go aggressive this summer and try to turn that corner, a guy like Besser would fit. But I don't think they can get it done. I don't think it's possible to have the sort of turnover and turn that it would make sense. I would hope that by the summer of 26, you start looking at guys like that to augment and accelerate where you are. Here's a good question. How much time have I done? Holy cow, 1,200 some odd people watching this thing. Y'all are nuts. Alexander's back. Do I think Mike Sullivan is the guy to coach this team for the future? Alexander feels like his message has stalled out and the players aren't buying into his system anymore. I feel like I was over that a lot. October, November, December, explaining the changes that Mike Sullivan has made this year, the buy-in that it took, the buy-in that was being displayed. There's not many people who around the team who would say the team hasn't bought in. Look at the growth of Philip Tomasino. If you want to kind of, that might be the prime example to answer your question, Alexander. And I don't know if Mike Sullivan really has the stomach to go through a terrible rebuild. I think right now everybody sort of has a lot of hope. Look at Philip Tomasino and how far he's come from a very one-dimensional game that wasn't producing nearly enough even for Nashville. They pawned him off on the Penguins. They're like, you want to give us anything? Great. Here. How much better he's playing defense. He's making a concerted effort to play on the walls. It's not his natural inclination, but he's trying to be a 3D player for the Penguins. That's Mike Sullivan. So is he the best coach for a bunch of 23 to 25-year-olds? We'll have to see. Don't forget, the guy was hired as the AHL coach, and half a dozen of those guys made the leap. He certainly didn't impede Brian Rust, Tom Kuhnackel, Scott Wilson, Connor Sherry. There's one more I'm missing. You're probably like, Dan, Jake Gensel. No, wait, Gensel would not have been that guy. Sullivan was already in the NHL by the time Gensel got to the farm team. But there's somebody else that I'm missing. Anyway, there were a handful of guys that he helped, if you want to count Matt Murray, although I don't think a coach can help a goalie too much. So, yes, maybe no. We'll find out, but he certainly has buy-in. His system has morphed dramatically this season. Think of how the Penguins play low to high. And you're going to I watched something at practice yesterday. You're going to see something tonight. You're going to see a couple of plays in which the Penguins play low to high, or at least try to. Let's hope they have their legs and you can see a decent hockey game, those of you who have made the trip. You're going to see kind of a bumper at 5-on-5. And then you're going to see that bumper sneak to the circle. Kind of a tic-tac-toe back to the middle and a good shot with people going after the rebound. You're going to see stuff like that. That's using what the Penguins, the strength to their advantage. They're not as fast as these other teams. And so they're having to outwork other teams. They're having to get the puck in deep and win those puck battles. Kyle says, are you as puzzled as I am that they didn't trade Grzelcyk? I'm just going to assume they're going to re-sign him. Now, if they don't re-sign him, that's going to be just crazy. Over, under, I have no idea how many games the Penguins are going to win. They've played, they played extraordinarily well against Colorado a couple nights ago. That was their A++ game. And it's going to be tough for them to win games. There's no question about it. Zach is glad they kept Raquel. I think Sidney Crosby would be as well. And I think, if you're going to keep Raquel and Rust and have that top line and kind of build around them, it sort of makes sense, I suppose. It's not a wrong decision not to trade Raquel. I certainly expected it. It's not wrong to have not done him. Why didn't they trade Sullivan? Because you're not the GM. Okay. Zane says, when is Dubas? I'm going to stop this at 40 minutes because I do have to get ready and get to the arena. When is Dubas going to acquire real difference makers? Seems like he's building the future supporting cast, but has not gotten any blue chip prospects, kind of setting the tone for mediocrity. Rutger McGroarty is supposed to be a difference maker. You might see Ville Koivunen become that. One of those two has a chance to be, kind of that second. Actually, you know what? Let's just call it a top 6 winger. Yeah, there again, when you trade Michael Bunting for a Tommy Novak, Novak had better be, it better be better. Yeah, you got me. Than say a Cody Glass, because you've given up a whole lot more for him. The Penguins got paid to take Cody Glass and had a chance to do whatever they, make whatever they could of him. Whereas they paid for Novak and they paid handsomely. So that's the trade I think that's going to define this trade deadline. If they can get something with the second round pick, if they can get something out of Novak, then you're okay. But you're right. There are no difference makers. They're going to have to acquire them. That's this summer. That's the top 5 pick or this top 6 pick this summer. That's the top 5, top 6 pick next summer. That's their best chance. Let's see here. I'm going to pick one more question. I'm just going to do it at random. One I actually understand anyway. Here's from Nitrate. Based on the actual trades made, Dubas did well. This team will be perfectly fine in 2030. Mark it down. I don't doubt they will be pretty good in 2030. They will at least be competitive, or they should be. But good Lord, that's a long time. That's 5 years from now. Holy crap, 1,400 people are watching this? I think you people need a hobby. Nitrate does have a good point. Unless we know what Dubas was offered for Raquel, let's not talk about the missed opportunity to cash in. You are technically correct, but I can look at the market values and say what should have been offered or what should have been out there within some reasonable proximity. Derek, I don't think the problem is the team is not buying into Sullivan. The problem with Sullivan is that he is an elite coach that refuses to actually trust young players and relies on veterans. You mean like Cody Glass, Blake Lizotte, Philip Tomasino, Owen Pickering got a good ride. P.O. Joseph gets back into the lineup. Joseph is all of, 26? Joel Blomqvist got a pretty good ride this season. Derek, I think what happens here is it becomes a self-confirming prophecy. Sullivan hates young players. So when there is an example of a young guy, let's say Emil Bemstrom, who's actually getting a bit of a run here again, Bemstrom will play Friday night. So when there's a player that you guys love, Jesse Puljujärvi, or whoever else you want to throw into this mix, that Sullivan determines doesn't fit, isn't playing well enough, or whatever the logic is, you all gravitate to that one, and you miss the five. I'll tell this quick story since the numbers are still going up, so I'll keep talking. By the way, like, subscribe, whatever platform you're on. Give me the follow on X. Give me the follow on Facebook. Give me the subscribe click on Facebook. I was talking with a member of the Penguins organization a couple weeks ago, kind of in the midst of my Wilkes-Barre travels during Four Nations. And we were kind of laughing because I was just chuckling on Twitter because I got some pretty vitriolic comments about Mike Sullivan hates young players. Mike Sullivan hates toughness. Mike Sullivan doesn't change. Mike Sullivan does and I've said it 1,000 times. There are legitimate criticisms of Sullivan that can be levied, that he won't play young players or that he hates toughness, or just those are just wrong. And member of the Penguins organization, I were kind of chuckling. It was like, if you all knew Mike Sullivan, or if you had the real Mike Sullivan, he is completely not opposed to any of that. He would play toughness in his lineup any day of the week. Think about this. Boko Imama is still on the roster. He was getting games in which the other team had a guy that Boko needed to counteract or sort of, keep in check. Vinny Desharnais came out of the lineup because Tom Wilson kind of, put him in his place, and Desharnais didn't do a lot back. Think about that. Sullivan put John Ludwig, both a young player and a tougher guy, he's not a fighter or a tough guy, but a tougher defenseman, into the lineup for that very attribute. So I can go on and on with examples. But the point of the matter was that Mike Sullivan certainly has no problem with youth or toughness, but you have to contribute to the lineup. You have to make the team better that night. So if the young player is just scuffling and hasn't earned trust yet, one good game, two bad games, or one good game, one horrendous game, and hasn't found that level of consistency yet, sure, Sullivan with a veteran team is going to hold back the young player a little bit until they find that rhythm. In fact, that's exactly what Jason Spezza said about Emil Bemstrom. He had to find his B game. And Bemstrom very much. We've seen that in the last several Pittsburgh Penguins games, that Bemstrom had a brilliant game. He was great against the New York Rangers in New York before the Four Nations. The following night, it was kind of a cluster against Philadelphia. Nothing really worked for the team that night. Vasily Ponomarev was down the middle, and Ponomarev and Bemstrom just didn't connect on anything. Okay, coming out of the break, couple bad games for Bemstrom. He was pretty decent against Colorado. That third line with Kevin Hayes and Michael Bunting, wasn't it? Or was it Danton Heinen? I forget now. But they were good. And Bemstrom very quietly contributed to the line. Maybe not necessarily with all, the visible scoring chances, but he was creating them for his line mates, winning puck battles on the wall and those sorts of things. So he has to find that A game, or that B game rather. So when he doesn't have his best, he still contributes. Any chance Spezza gets interviewed this summer for GM openings? I would probably say one more year. Or Spezza has to begin to grow his front office reputation as a guy who is sort of stepping out of Dubas's shadow, isn't just doing Dubas's bidding. I'm using very harsh language, but you get what I'm saying. Spezza's going to have to build his own identity in that regard. And the only way to do that is just to keep doing it. People around hockey begin to notice. They talk to you, and Spezza's like, okay, I think we're going to do this, that. We need to do this. But like, oh, okay, he's got it. Okay, so I think I am going to wrap it up there. Let me double check, make sure there's not, oh man, there are still a ton of questions. I'm sorry. But that's it for me. I have to get ready, head to the arena. That's my trade deadline analysis. I give it a C because it moved the ball forward, but we're still waiting, and there's still a whole lot more work, and the seeds were planted. But that's all it was. We'll see if the Penguins can water them. We'll see what grows. All right, kids. From Las Vegas, from my buddy Sean's house, we're heading to T-Mobile now. Have fun, and do me a favor. Don't get hurt. Especially if you're in Vegas. When you have $10 extra in your pocket, walk away. Have fun.